Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Questioning Behaviour Podcast. As always, I'm here with my much better half Sarah, and we are joined by another special guest today. As always, it's hardly surprising. But today we are here by Margaret Echelbarger, and I'm not pronouncing that correctly by any stretch of the imagination, but we are here joined by Margaret. Margaret, please tell the crowd, who are you, what did you do, and how do you get there?
Sure. So first, perfect pronunciation of my last name, I will say. Second, I am Margaret. I am a postdoc at the University of Chicago, specifically in the Center for Decision Research. So I'm at the Booth School of Business, primarily working with Nick Epley. I'm also working with some other faculty, including Abby Sussman.
Oh, big names are thrown around already.
Friend of the show, Abby Sussman.
Absolutely.
You know, I do not take for granted that I'm in a place where I feel very supported and where the environment is very collegial. And I will say, and I'm jumping so far ahead, but one thing I tell my students, the students who I work with is, listen, you're at one of the best universities in the world, or really just any university. You have this opportunity to make connections with faculty. And a lot of times, you know, you might want to take a class with someone, but it just doesn't work out. And that doesn't mean you can't try to make a connection with them. And so in every instance, I have emailed many different faculty at Booth and during my time at Michigan and at other institutions I've been at. And no one has denied me the opportunity to meet with them. Everyone is so willing to share their time with me, to talk about our shared interests, or to talk about, the job market, or just how to do research, or how to be a grad student, how to be a postdoc. So maybe you'll edit that for later in the conversation, but I think it's a really important point to make, that we're sometimes so starstruck, if you will.
Sure.
And we're reluctant to reach out to people because we think that they're going to say no, or they're just not going to have time, or, you know, why would they want to talk to someone like me? But truly, at every institution I've been at, no one has ever said, no, I will not talk to you. It's been fantastic.
Okay.
That's
well,
wonderful.
I mean, that's great, you know, to know in general. And it's also nice to know that before we've even hit the 3-minute mark, we've already gotten some really good advice.
But more about me, I guess.
Yes.
I study consumer behavior and pro-sociality in children and adults. And I think that this is an interesting perspective. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but, you know, a lot of the work that we do in business school settings is rightfully so focused on adults, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But as a good graduate student from the University of Michigan, I like to take a lifespan perspective with my work. So thinking not only about, you know, why are we the decision makers we are as adults, but also how did we become to be the decision makers we are? And also just how do children make decisions too? Mm-hmm. So I love kids for a variety of reasons. One, they tell you all their family secrets. Two, they provide just such wonderful insight into early human behavior. And so in many ways, they're this wonderful methodological tool for understanding how we become the adults we are. And I like to acknowledge that it wasn't always really the case that as scientists, we viewed children as anything other than little adults. And I'm sure you've heard of Piaget. Piaget provided this important insight that, no, they're not just tiny adults. They are, developing humans with these interesting perspectives on the world. And I really could tell you just some really fun stories about how they just see things so differently. And if you will indulge in this one tangent,
sure.
Often when we're doing developmental work with kids, we'll have siblings come join for the sessions, like when we're on a campus lab. And so one of my research assistants was running a child in a study, we'll call the target child in the study, and they had a younger sibling who needed to be entertained. And of course, I was happy to step in. I mean, half of what I did, I think, as a grad student was color with kids and do puzzles. And there's a lot that comes out of those conversations that really helped me generate new ideas. But in this one particular case, I was coloring Disney princesses with a little girl, and she asked me who my favorite Disney princess was. And, I said Belle because Belle loves to read. And truthfully, I haven't seen a Disney movie after Lion King, I think. So I'm not really up on the latest. So I think that ages me a bit. But and I said, of course, who's your favorite Disney character? And she said, well, Ariel. And I said, wow, is it because Ariel can swim underwater? Is it because she's a mermaid or beautiful hair? And she looked back at me and said, well, no, it's because she can talk underwater and you can understand her. That's really cool. Fair enough. So that's nothing I ever would have thought of as a reason to love Ariel as a character, but it's so true. Ariel can talk underwater and we can understand her. But I think I'm supposed to still be talking about me and how I got to where
how about this? How about I guide you a bit with a question?
Oh, so thank you.
You clearly have an incredible passion for your work. Now, I would like to know, how did that passion come about and why specifically in that topic?
Okay, so my interests have evolved over time. And if you look at my CV, you'll see, okay, she did this undergrad in cognitive and linguistic sciences, and then she did this master's in child language, but wait, then she went to psychology at Michigan, completed a PhD, and now she's at Booth. Like, what? But it really all makes sense in some ways, because at each step, I learned first how to narrow my interests and identify what really resonated with me and what didn't. But a common thread through all of my work is just this intense desire to understand why we are the way we are.
Sure.
Whether that be through language development, whether that be through understanding how we interact with autonomous virtual agents, whether that be how we become the financial decision makers we are. And so
my favorite topic.
Yes, one of mine too. And in fact, when I reflect, and one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this, my work related to consumer behavior and financial decision making, is until I really got into it, I didn't understand how peculiar of childhood I had in terms of economic socialization. And by that, I mean, from a very young age, my parents spoke very candidly with me about money, what it is, its function in our household and in society more broadly. I had a checking account. I realized a lot of people don't write checks anymore, but I had a checking account in middle school, elementary or middle school, and then I had a credit card shortly thereafter. And I want to be clear, it's not because as a family we were rich or anything like that. We are certainly, I'm very privileged. We were very much solidly middle class, but rather my parents really understood how important it was going to be for me to have this understanding as someone who's growing up at a time when people are treating this topic as relatively taboo. And they still do. In conversation with parents who are working with, who are allowing their children to participate in my studies. And so I'm always encouraging parents to talk to their kids about money. But I will say also, my dad is in banking. And
I see.
I think some of that is also a result of him and his profession, but also my mother really being the person who made the financial decisions in the home, who was doing the bills and, the budgeting and the taxes and whatnot.
She runs the household account. Yeah, fair enough.
Yes. And so, I got to see all this. And as an only child, I suppose, your parents become your best playmates. And so we got to play at grocery shopping and talking about needs and wants. And I just have these really vivid memories of going to the to the bank on Fridays when my parents were paid, and that's when I would get my allowance, and it was $12. My mom would write a check for $12. I would deposit $10 and I would get $2 back. And in fact, I remember my first bank account number. I'm not going to repeat it here.
Really shouldn't.
So it really just comes out of these experiences that I realized not everyone has, in terms of, having these candid discussions about money with family. And I will say, in elementary school, I dressed up as a money bag for Halloween one year. And
that's so cute.
I do have a picture I can share with you.
Excellent. No, please do. The thing is, in the Netherlands, we don't really do Halloween. At least when I was growing up, Halloween was not a thing. I generally have a feeling that, because the euro got introduced in the Netherlands when I was still growing up. If we had Halloween in the Netherlands when I was younger, I probably would have dressed up like a euro coin one year.
I love it.
I'm glad we have this in common.
One more story, again, I shouldn't say one more story. I like going on tangents. My parents and I had the good fortune of being able to go to London when I was in elementary school. Lovely. And that was my first time on a plane, but that's not what this story is about. So the British, the dollar pounds, well, they're not dollars. I literally dollar pound, but you get what I'm saying. The pound. Mm-hmm. Has the face of the Queen on it, but it has her aging, right? So there are some pounds that have her very young, and there are some pounds that have her a bit older.
I mean, she is essentially immortal by this stage, so you might as well.
Well, so the problem is, for my parents anyway, it was not a problem for me. I started to pocket the different faces of the Queen, and it really adds up. If you are trying to, collect them all. So my parents were wondering, at least my mom was like, where is money going? And I get home and I just have this stash of coins with the different faces of the Queen on it. So anyway, come to find out, I had pocketed away quite a bit of money. I was young, that I didn't really understand at that time that the pound was worth more than the dollar.
Oh, yes.
And so I still have those coins, of course. And
oh, lovely. They're probably quite valuable right now. Good for you.
I don't know about that. After Brexit, they're probably worth nothing.
No, I mean as collector's items, not because of the exchange rate.
Well, I should probably, I have not been to London since the 2001, I think, but okay. I should probably go back and add to my collection, I think, when it's safe to do so.
I think so. So I'm interested, if you kind of have alluded to the fact that, you recognize that maybe your childhood isn't the usual case of a childhood in terms of being sort of exposed to money and financial decisions, or at least being sort of, having these sort of more candid conversations with your parents about the economic system itself. So, given that's not the usual experience, what can children teach us about financial decision making?
So first, and I do want to acknowledge, I think you've given up on me answering the original question you posed.
We'll get back to it. We don't have to do this chronologically. We can do this in whatever order we want to.
It's much easier if it's chronological, honestly.
Nah. This is our show. We can do what we want.
I love it.
You're not editing it.
Oh, no. We'll just go with it. First, I think children offer adults the opportunity to learn things that they might not have learned themselves growing up, because it's almost like they provide us an opportunity or license us to engage in a learning process that maybe we might feel a bit self-conscious about engaging in just as adults. It's like, well, my child must learn about saving and spending and how banks work, and I'm not entirely sure how to do that. So let's read these books together, and I'll probably be able to answer questions that they have, when they're very young. And so in that way, I think there's an opportunity for parents who might feel a bit uncomfortable talking about this due to fears that they don't really understand what's going on, to learn through their child and learn with their child.
A very wholesome image is like developing in my mind, where obviously, from my childhood, parents read their kids stories before bed. I can just already see a parent at the end of their working day, kids in bed, reading a book together, passive investing for dummies, and then later on moving on to the sequel, active investing for dummies. I love it.
Well, so I would start, a bit in a different place, if you will. I actually, for fun, I read children's books that are related to money topics, some more explicit than others. And there's some really good books out there for children, 4 to 8 and beyond. I just happen to right now be living in the space of books geared toward children 4 to 8. So I haven't made it to passive investing for dummies yet, but I look forward to reading that book. But I'm
sure it exists. I don't actually know if it does.
If it doesn't, you can write it.
I should definitely be the one to write that book.
But from a research perspective, I enjoy seeing how children come to make sense of these really complicated topics, like the fungibility of money, or how does money come to be? I remember being young and thinking, well, if my mom is just going to write a check for these groceries, why doesn't she just write a check to make us really rich? Like, if that's how it works, right? And so that is a common intuition that many young children have, that money literally grows on trees. You go to this place, it's this building, and you hand someone a slip and you get money back. Well, let's just get more money back. And it totally makes sense. And then
I'm still trying that now as an adult, but so far it's not been working out for me, which is
I know, right? I mean, me too. And then we graduate to learning about, okay, well, how do they make sense about where money lives and the fungibility of money? And this is where I'm going to say publicly that I've not really read or watched Harry Potter, but this is relevant because apparently in Harry Potter, what they have like safety deposit boxes or something. And that's where the money lives. And so I want to write, I mean, this would be complete clickbait. Harry Potter was wrong, right? In the sense that it's not that our money is kept in a vault in a safety deposit box. It's that when we take a $5 bill to the bank and we deposit it, we have $5 added to our account, but that same $5 bill might be given to someone who withdraws money from the bank that day. And a lot of young children do not grasp that they still have that $5 in the bank. They think someone took it. And so we learn again about how they think about these complex processes, how they come to just make sense of basic concepts, just like I said, the fungibility of money. But then in terms of my own research, a bit more explicitly, we learn that children as young as 5 develop these feelings about spending, and that these feelings predict what they're actually going to do with money. And to me, that's really interesting because what it's telling us is that children, young children who do not have ample sort of explicit experience with the market, with, actually exchanging money for whatever they're buying at the store, are developing these feelings. And so where do these feelings come from? And we know that among adults, these feelings about spending are associated with key financial health outcomes like debt and how much people have saved. And so trying to think about, where are there opportunities across the life course to push people to maybe think a bit more about the consequences of what they're doing with their money, and to maybe even introspect on how they feel about what they're doing with their money. But I will say, I do think children see quite a bit. They see us at the store. They see how we react to different sorts of purchases, that buying a Snickers bar makes me really happy, or, shelling out $2,000 for a computer makes me pretty unhappy.
Depends on the computer.
Yes, of course. And US dollars, by the way, just to clarify. But anyway, I think there's a lot that they can reveal, and I sometimes envy parents who get some of these insights a bit every day. And in fact, when I meet with Abby and Nick, I sometimes explicitly ask them for stories about their children, because you just never know what you're going to learn.
I mean, in all fairness, if you had to ask people about, the behavioral science between behind their children and their children's developmental processes, you could do worse than to ask Apley and Sussman. Like, I think, you're pretty good on the money there. No, I've when it comes to just understanding people, their development, especially empathy, I'm pretty sure Nick wrote a really famous book about that. I've read the book. I thought it was really, really great.
Yes, Mind-Wise. Such a lovely book. I recommend.
Oh, no, absolutely. Same. I have it on the bookshelf somewhere. Would 100% recommend. And of course, Sarah and I are massive fans of Abby. Absolutely massive fans. But to get to, because your topic, so we've got Sarah at a bit of an unfair disadvantage, because obviously, Margaret, you and I, we're both in the consumer finance sphere. Sarah is technically speaking not. So before we go onto this massive tangent into consumer finance in all ages, we do have to get back to the topic at hand, because you are part of our early career behavioral scientist series here on this podcast that we're really trying to make happen here, and you're trying to make it not happen.
I am so sorry. I'm just so first I should say I'm very excited to chat with you, and certain topics get me really pumped. Like, for example, talking about children and financial decision making. But yes, let's answer the super important questions and why you asked me here in the first place.
Yes. So, clear passion for the work. Your educational history makes sense to me, as you've explained it before, but why a PhD? Just why?
Sure. So the reason why I'm stumbling right now is I ask my students I work with, why do you want to pursue a PhD? Because if you just love learning, you can go to the library. And
that's just a complete rejection of the entire higher education system.
No, well, so to be clear, that's very important when wanting to pursue a PhD, but it reminds me of that scene, of course, from Good Will Hunting, which, by the way, I mentioned it to a student the other day and they hadn't heard of Good Will Hunting. So I'm now not even able to make pop culture references to my students.
Are we old?
We are old.
No.
But more importantly, yes, I absolutely love learning. I love trying to find new ways to understand human behavior, and even just in some ways make sense of why I am the way I am and why the people around me are the way that they are. But also, I just really enjoy the research process and the intellectual freedom that a PhD affords. In many ways, matched with the right advisor, and I absolutely was, I'm able to pursue a line of work that brings me joy, but also can, from a practical perspective, inform efforts that practitioners might be interested in undertaking to, for example, promote conversations among parents and children about consumer behavior and even financial decision making more specifically. It's exciting to test theories and even develop your own. It's energizing to be in a group of at a conference or being even at a brown bag where people want to see you succeed, but also challenge your ideas in ways that make you think about your own thoughts a bit differently. And so it's really the environment it's a career, and I try to convey to the early career grad students and prospective grad students that I work with that this is in many ways like an apprenticeship, and you are setting yourself up for opportunities upon graduation. But in this moment, this too is a profession, and you are, I hope anyways, being paid for the work that you are doing as a PhD student. And so, and it is the real world. A lot of times we try to create this, to me, false dichotomy between higher ed and then the real world outside of it. But higher ed is very much a part of the real world. Sure. And so this is a very long-winded way of saying, yes, I too pursued the PhD because I enjoy learning, but I also enjoy the freedom that it has given me and the opportunities it has afforded me in terms of travel, meeting new people.
Before the pandemic, maybe.
That's a great point. I have been working from my sunroom now since March 2020. Right? Yes, it is 2021 now.
We can't all have a sunroom, but I love that for you.
Oh, no. I'm definitely overselling it if that's your response. So it's a sunroom, and it's an absolute, I feel like I'm being cooked on a daily basis because we do not have central air, which I recognize is not a typical thing in Europe, right? But it is in the US.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming when you were in your master's degree that you applied for the PhD, it clearly went well for you. But did the thought of going into industry, did that even remotely cross your mind, or were you just hell-bound from the very start? No, this is going to be a PhD. This is the process for me.
So just a small point there, I do want to acknowledge that I earned my master's degree within a PhD program, but transferred to Michigan, which I did never made clear. And that's, and I will say I transferred for personal reasons, not actually related to my program, because sometimes people wonder, did you transfer because you had maybe a bad experience or it wasn't a fit with your advisor? And in fact, my advisor at Kansas, Mabel Rice, was very supportive, was one of my letter writers. And so I just like to make that point that it's very unusual to transfer at the PhD level, but it's something I did. And I'm very thankful that I was able to complete a master's as a part of my training there. Then moving on to Michigan, and then moving on to Booth. But could you please repeat the question? Oh, industry, right?
Did you ever consider industry, or is it not your jam?
Well, so first I don't want to get too philosophical, but higher ed is its own industry.
Yeah, sure.
So, but I'm a realist. I have to consider industry, right? Do you mean, though, I should say, after the PhD or prior to the PhD?
Both.
So first, I never considered not pursuing a PhD ahead of pursuing the PhD. I had a phenomenal mentor in undergrad who showed me that someone like me could really do this. And so I was very, of one mind that I'm going to pursue a PhD. But once in the PhD, I realized, this job market situation is a little precarious. And so I think being a realist and being someone who needs to pay bills,
to afford a sunroom, obviously.
to afford a sunroom, to afford my dog, and to make sure that I have electricity so I can charge my phone and scroll TikTok. The whole what's been going on TikTok this past week in the U.S. is its own thing.
For sure.
But I have to consider industry because, one, I need a job, and two, of course, my goal is to secure, and I am on the job market, a tenure track position at an institution at this point in the U.S. or Canada. But I also know that statistically, that's going to be unlikely. That's going to be very hard to do. And so, fortunately, I have a number of friends who have been in, who have the experience of wanting a tenure track position and being unable to secure one, and they're now happy in their positions outside academia, and friends who never considered pursuing academia beyond the PhD and who are very happy in their positions outside of academia. And so I'm able to chat with all of them and their program evaluation specialists. They're working at Facebook or Google or other social media companies, or they're working in medicine, not in research, but in the term isn't really human resources anymore. It's people science or people. Anyway, so I've been able to have many helpful conversations with them, because just as we receive training in how to craft a CV, how to craft a cover letter, and talk about the skills we've developed, you have to do that for other sorts of industries as well. And I think it's also been very helpful for me throughout this process, from before the PhD, having a partner who is not in academia, who provides that outside perspective, learning about what he does, how he does it, how someone from the outside thinks about just what I do on a day-to-day basis, and sort of having someone who can empathize, but also give me a dose of reality every once in a while. So I hope that answers your question.
It does.
I reluctantly think about it insofar as my goal is to secure a position within academia.
Okay.
Right. Excellent.
Okay. You are currently doing a postdoc. Did you go on the job market in order to get that position? What was that process like, the transition from PhD to postdoc?
Sure. First, I want to acknowledge I was very lucky. I am in my dream postdoc. So What happened is, let me unpack that a bit. Once I was in I did my PhD in developmental psychology, but while there, I learned that my interests really sat at the intersection of developmental psychology and marketing. And then, of course, I came to learn there's this larger field, behavioral science, very much akin to psychology, but we see these departments more often in business schools. And so what happened is I then learned that there's this thing called the Center for Decision Research, and they have postdocs. And a couple years ahead of being on the market, in my last year of grad school, I started monitoring the listservs to see, and in particular the JDM listserv, to see what sorts of postdocs were cropping up in business schools. And then I tried to make connections to folks who were actually at booth, students and faculty alike. And my first faculty conversation was actually with Abby at the JDM conference in Vancouver, I believe. And I believe I was also able to meet with Ayala at that point, not in Vancouver, but at another time. And I just got really excited about the postdoc. And so my year, an opening, because at that point they had openings each year. My year, there was an opening to work with Nick. And I was thinking, well, I need, Nick is a phenomenal storyteller, wonderful writer, really enjoy his research. And as I joke, I wanted, we do postdocs to receive additional training. I wanted to learn how to talk to adults. So how could I make this happen? So I applied to work with him thinking, it's a shot in the dark, but this is what I want. I am committed to doing what I need to do to make this happen. Mm-hmm. And I did not apply to many postdocs. And I at that point was pretty much only applying to postdocs in my last year as a grad student, because I knew I needed that additional training and that additional time. So my advisor provided me with Susan Gelman provided me with the helpful information that, Margaret, you should really apply to more programs. And
you can't just stop at 5, mate. This is not how this works.
Well, and this is why I'm lucky, I only applied. It did work. Which is, it's funny because then what happened is a more junior student in the lab was advised to chat with me and then some other former students of Susan Gelman about postdocs. And she made the funny comment, but they all sort of didn't apply broadly. They just all secured the postdocs and tenure track positions they really wanted. And that is...
Clearly, we need to get onto this Gelman train of fortune, Sarah. Clearly, this woman has fallen into a kettle of magic juice or something.
Susan Gelman, I imagine many of your listeners are not familiar with Susan Gelman at Michigan. She is phenomenal. She is the advisor who will nurture your interests and gets excited about what excites you and make sure you have the resources you need to focus on your research and studies, and really just do everything that she can to make sure that you get to be the scholar you want to be. And so if you do have occasion to chat with a person who really is interdisciplinary in her work, she's been interim dean for the largest college at the University of Michigan, do invite her to chat with you. She's absolutely wonderful. But yes, there's something magical about Susan Gelman for sure. And I do not take that for granted. I landed my dream postdoc. And in fact, when Nick called me to tell me that I had received the position, I was a bit shocked. And so my voice didn't sound as excited as it should have. And so then I remember there being this pause in the conversation. And I said, well, this is my excited voice, Nick. I'm very excited about receiving the, this offer. And I was just very surprised and thankful. And so HR sent over my offer letter. And I remember running down to our admin office, immediately scanning in case there had been any mistake, signing and sending it back to HR at booth before the offer could be, rescinded.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, congratulations, first of all, on getting your dream postdoc. I mean, how long is the postdoc, can I ask? How long are you staying there?
Sure. Yes. So this postdoc, so the length can vary, but when I started the postdoc, it was imagined to be up to a 3-year endeavor, which is just wonderful in and of itself. Unfortunately, the pandemic threw a wrench into things in terms of the job market, among, of course, many other things that the pandemic has brought us. But so I'm thankful. It's unusual for there to be a 4th-year postdoc in my particular position. But there was funding that became available to support me in another role through the Center for Decision Research, which then allowed me to stay on as a postdoc for my 4th year. And this really was a last-minute thing. It was not guaranteed. And so Nick and I and others were brainstorming, how can I, what can I do this year to stay in academia to make sure that I am able to be a successful job market candidate or a competitive job market candidate. So I'm in my 4th year, although because we are on the quarter system, I don't think, a lot of my colleagues are starting class this month. I don't think I have to think about students returning to campus until the last week of September or so. Right. So I'm still enjoying my summer, if you will.
Sounds good to me. So then I know you should never ask this to a PhD or a postdoc, but we do it anyway because we're nasty and terrible people. But what comes after the postdoc? What do you want to do? What do you hope to do?
Sure. So that is up to the world to decide, right? I can only do so much. I am on the job market right now, and I am hoping to secure a tenure track position at a school and an institution that will allow me to do good work, but also really connect with students. And like I said, in the US or Canada at this point in my career. And so I'm doing as any job market candidate does, trying to put their best foot forward, put themselves out there, and make a case for their work and who they are as scholars and people. Now, again, going back to being a realist, I understand that there are more applicants than there are positions. And so, so should I not secure an offer, I will have to pivot, regroup, and apply to positions outside academic spaces come January or February, I think. And if that happens, I know I have a lot of friends in my corner. I know I have Susan, Nick, Abby. I know they're all going to do what they can to make sure, as I joke, that I can pay my bills in the upcoming year.
It's good to have people in your corner, especially when bills are involved.
Yeah. I mean, how do you deal with the uncertainty? I mean, you kind of, what you were saying sounds like a really interesting and healthy attitude to just say, look, this is as much as I can do. The world will determine the rest, whether I get a job offer or not. But yeah, I just can't imagine. Well, I'm going to have to imagine in a couple of months what that's going to be like. But how do you deal with that uncertainty?
Sure. I pet my dog a lot. And I mean, that is, I mean, it sounds funny, but that also is true. So I have a dog, Henry, who's been with me throughout this entire journey. I got him, I think, almost my first week in Kansas as a graduate student. And so he's 10 now. So that ages me again a bit.
Don't worry about it.
But I think how I manage the uncertainty is, one, knowing that I have family and a partner who are here for me. And also, I joke about having to pay my bills, but I know that should I not secure a position in academia, I will have time to find the right position for me in another space. And by that, I mean, I do have the financial resources to make sure that my next step, wherever it is going to be good for me. I do not take that for granted. That is definitely a privileged position to be in. And so that really actually helps me deal with the uncertainty. Also, I think because I am older than some of the other folks on the job market, this isn't my first job market. I did it for the postdoc and now I'm doing it again. I've seen that, I've sort of been through that course of self-doubt and treating these rejections as evidence that I'm not worthy of being in an academic space. And I don't see it like that anymore. Sure, I can maybe not have a good interview, or maybe not give the best talk that I wanted to give, or not answer questions as directly on a podcast as I should. But at the end of the day, I have some good ideas. I do good work. I'm a good person. I can be a good colleague. And so now I just hope someone who has decision-making power thinks that as well.
Good way of going about it, I'd argue. I think it's a very healthy frame of mind. And we've spoken to several people who have just come out of a PhD, who maybe have had some job market experience like yourself. And it's very healthy to just disentangle yourself from the fact that you've done all you can, you've delivered good work, you've got more good work in you, and we are currently in a fucking pandemic. So maybe this is not the time to secure, the Nobel Peace Prize or any type of prize, really, and to just have a job and to be able to work towards a job is already pretty damn amazing, I'd argue. And I mean, I really like your research. I really like the topic that you're in. I think it's absolutely great that you've had so much, as you call it, luck in both being able to transfer during your PhD. Like you said, that is quite rare to be able to secure I want to say a postdoc, but like it's a bloody great postdoc if you ask me. And the fact that, they kept you on even longer, and you can call that luck, you can call that skill, you can call that making the most of opportunities that you've been given. Whatever you want to call it, it's great that you've had that experience. And I think overall your experience in academia sounds like it's been just really, really good so far. And it's nice to hear that, because it's not that often anymore that you hear that, which is disconcerting.
Well, I will say, I do, to the students who are out there, luck, sure, we create the conditions perhaps for luck to happen. And I have been lucky. I have not had, for lack of a better term, I suppose, a negative experience in really any of the labs I've been in. And I've worked with people who want to see me succeed at every level, from these undergraduate research opportunities, post-bac, PhD, and now postdoc. And I acknowledge that is unusual. And I suspect that the reason I have such a healthy relationship with my work, with the field itself, is because I have been able to focus on my work, myself, and my friends and colleagues, and not this other stuff that can happen, financial concerns, chronic health issues, mentor-mentee mismatches, toxic environments. That has not been my reality. And that is, I think, unusual to be able to say that from undergrad through the postdoc.
Yes. but we're glad it exists, and we're glad that has been your reality. So I suppose, keeping all of that in mind, what advice would you give to a young PhD student? What advice would you give to an early career researcher in the field? You've already given some advice in the beginning, so reach out to everyone, get as much information as you can get. Any other advice you'd like to add?
I have lots of advice. You can sign up for my newsletter. No, that's a shameless plug. But that is actually the reason why I say that is because that is where my advice is. And I don't think I have enough time to share all of my advice. But one thing I like to tell students, particularly students who have been historically excluded from the academy, is that you belong. There are people and systems that actively work to exclude people, but nonetheless, keep in mind that you belong. And because you might not have the experience of, having a parent who is a professor or coming from an undergrad institution that is, a top 50 in the country, that doesn't make your ideas or your promise or your intellect any less valuable than, anyone else. And the second piece of advice I would give is there's enough competitiveness in this field that we should really take time to develop relationships with those who are around us, to celebrate the wins of our colleagues, to elevate those people who are doing really well or experiencing a win, and lament the rejections with those who are experiencing them as well, because it's really important to feel like you're in a collegial, collaborative, cohesive environment at every stage. And as I tell my students, as I tell my friends, I would much rather, quote, I have these air quotes going on, lose to a friend than I would a stranger. And so I want to see the people around me succeed. And in turn, I want people to celebrate me when I succeed.
That would be nice.
So those would be my two pieces for now.
Yeah. No, I massively second, especially that second note. I think there's enough envy in this field to last a lifetime, and we need to be putting more energy into the collaborative, supportive relationships that also matter a lot. But yeah, just to say, Margaret, good luck on the job market. It's happening for you right now, and I hope you get the outcome that you want, but if you don't, I've got a feeling you're going to be okay. Maybe we'll catch up with you soon.
One last thing is, and it is a part of the newsletter, and maybe you can link to it. I do have an email that is public for people to send me questions.
You're running ahead of yourself, Margaret. We have a plug question. Don't do our job for us. How rude.
Okay.
How rude.
I am the worst podcast guest. I am so sorry.
Well, Margaret, now that that you've run ahead of us so far anyway, we would like to ask you the final question of this podcast, if you will let us. You've mentioned so much during this episode, and you've mentioned some great things. Now, if listeners have any questions or want to reach out to you, want to know more about you, about both the newsletter that you've mentioned, the work that you do, your research, where can they find you online? Where would you like to direct them?
Well, if you want to learn more about me and my research, you can go to my website. It's mechelbarger.com. And so I'm sure that you will have my name in the title of the podcast, so you can get the spelling of Echelbarger. And then if you want to learn more about what I have to say about grad school, applying, and also just navigating the PhD, I do have my newsletter. It's letstalkgradschool.substack.com. And the email, if you would like to directly reach out with questions, is letstalkgradschool@gmail.com.
There you have it. Guys, as always, we'll make sure everything is linked in the description box of whatever platform you're using, so you don't have an excuse of getting Margaret's last name wrong. Pronunciation-wise, she might not be entirely there yet, but at least you'll be able to write it. And of course, we will link your Twitter as well, Margaret, because you are quite active on Twitter.
Oh, yes. Third recommendation, I'm so sorry, going back. You don't have to edit this, though, Sarah. Just academic Twitter can be a wonderful space. So this is how this connection happened, right?
Sure.
So just throw out your questions, then hashtag academic Twitter, hashtag academic chatter, and join the conversation. I love it. I love meeting students, faculty, etc. And I've made some Twitter friends. So,
absolutely.
That's brilliant. I'm glad Twitter was able to connect you guys, because this is the result. We're having this conversation. And just thank you so much, Margaret, for your time. It was so lovely to chat with you. And we wish you all of the luck. We hope that everything works out, and I'm sure it will.
Thank you so much for having me, and perhaps we can do a debrief in February. I'll update you on how everything went, and maybe my retrospective might be a little less rosy than my...
Well, in all fairness, Margaret, I've really enjoyed talking to you, and obviously the topic of your research I find absolutely fascinating. So if you want to debrief us in February, what we're going to do is we're just going to turn it into another episode for what will then be season 4 about financial decision making in children. So I'll see you then.
Oh, I'm there, 100%. Thank you both so much.
So that was our conversation with Margaret. Thank you so much, Margaret, for coming on the podcast. Great, again, to hear from another early career researcher who is currently in their dream postdoc position, and I'm sure never wants to leave. But yeah, it sounds like lots of important lessons learned and taken away from the PhD, super passionate about the research, and another great voice to add to our series, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, although Margaret has mentioned that she actually transitioned or transferred her PhD, which I don't think is a very easy thing to do, I do find it funny, and it's become quite the trend or the thread throughout the series, that people who found themselves in incredibly supportive environments, even when faced with some type of adversity or some type of stress or something that out of the ordinary, if you will, if they have a supportive environment and people that are there for them and help them grow as people and as researchers and as academics, etc., these are the people that do actually stay in academia. And this is not exactly a surprising revelation. I mean,
nope.
It is what it is. But it's just, I think it's a very interesting way of shaping academia, where the people that move on are those that had good experiences, because, or at least from the interview series, from what we've gathered, that is what seems to be going on. And although I'm happy for those who've had very good experiences and as a result have been more competitive and have achieved what they wanted to achieve, props to them. But it makes me worried about how academia is shaping up in general, and the fact that this has been going on for so long. But maybe that is a topic for another time.
What do you mean going on for so long? You mean the lack of supportive environments?
Yeah.
Academia
is known for that.
Yeah. No, it's really, I think you're right that we're starting to see a trend emerge, in our conversations with people, for where people have succeeded when facing adversity in this field is when they've had really strong supportive communities built around them within the sort of, academic workplace. And also, I think, as Margaret was saying, for her, having a partner who's not in academia, like helping to keep grounded, for her was really helpful. So it's not a surprise, and it shouldn't come as a bit of a shock, but I think it does pose an interesting and kind of horrifying question of the opportunity cost of not creating supportive environments, or not investing in creating supportive environments, which, as you said, has also been the experience of lots of people in this world, and how many people we will have lost because of that from the field.
I mean, I can pose you this question then in a really nasty way, but the people that academia loses out on, is academia actually actively losing out? Because, and this is not to say that the people that are not going into academia are not equally as talented or maybe even competitive, but academia doesn't have the number of positions at the top that it recruits for at the bottom. So I don't think academia really cares about whether you do or don't apply. They can't place you anyway. Anyway, I feel like this outro is becoming a bit depressing and not at all representative of the actually really enjoyable chat that we've had with Margaret.
Why do we always do this?
I don't know. We're just depressing people, really.
We are. How I'd like to end this episode, and you can end it however you want to, Merle, that's your prerogative, is to say I thought this was another great conversation, another great voice to add to our chorus of early career researchers. And yeah, I find Margaret's joy for her research super infectious. And it definitely has an incredibly positive spillover effect on myself and like how I feel about my own work. So hopefully you, listener, have enjoyed the positive spillover that has been Margaret's enthusiasm. And stick around for some more chats with some big fish and some emerging fish in the field. We've got lots more coming for you in the Questioning Behaviour podcast.
Absolutely. And if you are a bit sad that we didn't dive into Margaret's topic of research despite her overflowing enthusiasm, we can essentially make you the promise that she will very likely be back for season 4, and we will actually actively talk about financial decision making in non-adult populations. So stay tuned for that somewhere in, I don't know, next year, May or April.
Yeah, if we're still going, we'll do it.
We will.
Promise. If we're still going.
Anyway, guys, as Sarah said, next week, another big fish. Week after, emerging fish, which to me just conjures up images of a fish trying to dig itself out of the mud, but we'll just leave that. And as always, we hope you thought this was an absolutely great episode, entertaining, thought-provoking, interesting, maybe even educational. And we hope to see you again next week. Bye.